Hi there. Today I'm taking a look at a Nebbiolo d'Alba, and this is from a winemaker called Luciano Sandrone. It's a single vineyard wine from a vineyard called Valmaggiore, which evidently is in the village of Vezza d'Alba. It's the 2017 vintage. And unfortunately, the winemaker Luca Sandrone died earlier this month. A huge loss to the winemaking community in the Langhe and in Barolo, because he was a very influential producer there. A man who'd made, I believe, 40 vintages there, starting in 1978, when he first purchased a small half-hectare plot of the famous Cannubi Boschis vineyard. He hadn't come from a family of winemakers. He didn't have an inherited vineyard or anything like that, but evidently his parents must have been very supportive, because he made the first couple of vintages of his wine in their garage. Throughout the 40 years that he made wines in this region, Luciano built up his family's estate, and by the time of his death, I think they had about 27 hectares of vines, including this vineyard, which they purchased outright in 1994. So it's a whole hillside, evidently. It's not shared with anybody else, of really quite steep hillsides, sandy, well-drained soils and old vines, and a vineyard that has to be worked entirely by hand. It's too steep to be cultivated by machinery. Alba, the area that covers the winemaking regions of Barolo and Barbaresco, or much of them anyway. So an area not entitled to either of those designations. But let's see what the wine brings us, shall we? Just to talk you through its production, it's made very much as Sandrone made all his wines, in open stainless steel fermenters, where they would macerate, having started their fermentation with indigenous yeasts, so the microflora that's come in from the vineyard on the fruit. The wine then goes into 500-litre barrels, oak barrels, where it'll stay for about 9 months, and it does its malolactic conversion in those barrels. So really quite straightforward winemaking. It's really the vineyard, I guess, where the wine is crafted from that point of view. So let's talk about this, shall we? First of all, the colour. It's very noticeable that this is, being a Nebbiolo, quite a pale ruby, almost to sort of garnet. You can see straight through it that it's still a young wine, but there is a lightening at the rim in terms of the pigmentation. So let's see what the aromas are like. The aromas are warm, inviting, and very pretty. What do I mean by that? Makes me think of Pontefract cakes. There's a licoricey ripeness, but a sort of sweet licorice. There's a juicy red fruit. I mean, it makes me think of sort of mulberry, ripe mulberry, that sort of thing. But actually, a sort of a lifted. People talk about Barolo as having those aromas of tar and roses. This is much more licorice and lifted rose petal notes. But there's a richness. There's almost a sort of a gingerbready richness. A sort of a sweet, cakey note. It's very inviting aromas. So let's have a taste. On the palate, that's light to medium bodied. There's plenty of tannin, there's plenty of acidity, and those two are playing against each other. But there's this lovely, ripe, red cherry fruit in the middle of it. Not bursting red cherry, but slightly sort of more red to dark cherry note. And then almost some lifted sort of, I want to say sort of raspberry note, but it's somewhere between the sort of red fruit raspberry and more developed plum prune sort of notes. There's a lifted red fruit perfume that's running through the middle of that, with a smattering of cinnamony sweet spice over the top of it as well. The freshness is lifting the wine quite well. There's a little bit of alcohol warmth. I mean, the label says this is 14% alcohol, but it's not marring the finish. It's allowing that sort of dancing red fruit, spicy notes, and there's a slight meatiness, I think, also to the finish. And those flavours are lasting beautifully well. There's a lovely intensity of the fruit. Like so many of Sandrone's wines, this has got a real poise. There's a freshness to the acidity without there being a tartness. The acidity is enlivening the fruit really beautifully, giving it length. There's a lovely persistence to the finish on this. It's a very classy wine, and I mean, I think you can expect to pay in the region of $50 to $60 for this wine and other vintages, and that's somewhere in the region of half to a third of what you would pay for the same producer's Barolos. So I think something that, you know, really is a classy wine at an excellent price. So thank you for watching. I hope you found it interesting, and do join us again. Bye now.